Hello and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'll be talking about Season 7, Episode 10, The Gum. Hello everyone. I hope everyone out there is doing well. I am doing okay. It's been a week. If any of you out there saw my Instagram post on the Hot and Heavy Instagram account, if you're following, and if you're not, shame on you. I'm always going to shame those who don't follow Hot and Heavy on Instagram. Anyway, for those of you who saw my post, I had indicated there's going to be a little bit of a delay this week on when I publish because of just an emotionally draining day I had. So if you want to know what happened, everything's okay. But my daughter had a health scare this week. She called me from school and told me that she was losing feeling in her right leg. That's terrifying. So I went and, of course, got her right away from school, and we went to the emergency room. And on the way there, she was telling me some of her other symptoms. Her vision felt a little weird. She was having trouble finding words. And I said, this sounds like what happens to me when I get a migraine. And the numbness in her leg was alarming. It was her whole leg from her hip down to her foot. And so, but I did know that sometimes I get that as well. For me, it's a visual aura that happens first. And then every now and then I get some numbness in a limb or just a part of my body as part of the whole migraine experience. It's terrible. So as we're driving to its children's hospital, about a half an hour away, and I go there because it's the best. You always want the best for your kids, am I right? I was trying to calm myself down because I said, well, if it's a migraine, that's awful too, but it's certainly not the worst thing that could be happening considering her very scary symptoms. Anyway, we were there for about 5 hours. Turned out that is what it was. That was the diagnosis. Her feeling came back after we got to the ER. Everything else went back to normal, except that's when the headache hits. So for those of you who might not get migraines, you guys are very, 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 very lucky. But also, those neurological symptoms tend to happen before the headache strikes. So it's sort of like your indicator. You're like, oh, I can't see half of this door anymore. I'm getting a migraine, so you better get some medicine in your system. Anyway, so by the time we got to the ER and we were waiting for her to get checked into her room, her headache was terrible. She was very nauseous. She ended up throwing up a bunch of times. It was a really, really tough day. And so once they were confident nothing else was going on, nothing more serious, they gave her what's called a migraine cocktail. And she had a great reaction. I mean, she responded and felt tons better after all that medication was pumped into her system through the IV. And by the time we left, she was singing Taylor Swift. She was hungry. She, was back to her normal self. So it was just a day. And of course, as timing would have it, my husband was out of town. This shit always happens when he's out of town. It's no one's fault. It's not his fault. It's not anyone's fault. It's just another layer of difficulty that somehow always falls on my lap. Whenever he's out of town, scary shit happens. I shouldn't say whenever, obviously. It's not every single time. He goes out of town a lot. But when stuff like this happens, it always seems to fall on when he's not here. But at any rate, everything turned out fine. She bounced back the next day, still had a dull headache. For those of you who experience these, it can linger for a little bit. But she was such a trooper, I have to say. I'm so, so proud. Sorry. I'm so proud of her. She handled it so well. Certainly better than I did when I started getting them. She really just, dealt with it. She wasn't panicking. She was definitely scared, but she wasn't like kind of, thinking the worst, which is what I tend to do. I'm not proud of it, but so I'm so thankful that she just kind of kept her cool and dealt with it as she was feeling those symptoms and, really handled it so maturely. So just so proud of her and the next day she was ready for school before I even got up, and all she was thinking about was not getting too behind on her schoolwork. And so I'm just so thankful, first of all, that it wasn't anything more serious. I did have kind of a day yesterday, really, really dealing just with the fact that I'm so heartbroken that she has to deal with this now, because I'm hoping what happened on Wednesday was just a really severe one-off thing, but there's no indication that'll be the case. But there's also no indication that, she's going to be suffering all the time. I tend to go to like the worst possibilities, but I just have to just roll with whatever this ends up being. But yesterday I was certainly kind of in this weird fog of feeling just really sad that she might be dealing with this a lot. Because as a migraine sufferer, I've had this thought so often where I'm like, God, I just don't want to pass this on to my kids. I don't want my kids to have to deal with this because they stress me out so much, which is probably why I get more than I should, because I get so stressed out and I'm paranoid about them. One of my like kind of rolling thoughts throughout my adulthood after having kids is just like, oh God, I hope my kids never have to deal with this. So it was in that sense kind of devastating for me because I didn't get my first migraine like this until I was 29 and my daughter's 13. So I was just kind of dealing with that kind of like heartbreak yesterday, going like, damn it, I don't want her to have to like deal with this so young. She just should have like a fun childhood without having to deal with like this bullshit. But again, it could have been a lot worse. I'm feeling, not as glum about it, especially because she's awesome and she handled it so incredibly well. I'm learning a lot from her, in fact, about just, hey, you got to roll with it. And if it happens, you got to deal with it. And so anyway, super proud of my daughter. Scary situation at first, but it turned out as I think the best way it could have, considering the symptoms she was having. And it was super, super scary. But at the same time, I feel relieved that it's something that we can deal with and it's treatable. And there are things you can do to hopefully prevent them from happening. Okay, so that's all I have for banter this week. I think that's enough. So let's just get into this episode, The Gum. The synopsis is as follows. Jerry pretends to like a gum given to him by Lloyd Braun, who had recently had a nervous breakdown. Elaine's missing button leads ex-boyfriend Braun to think she is hitting on him. George's apparently eccentric behavior makes his old friend Dina think he's mentally unstable, while Kramer reopens an old movie theater. This episode was written by Tom Gamble and Max Pross. We open in Monk's. George and Jerry are at a booth, and George is very curious about the cashier. Ooh, Ruthie Cohen? You know her name? Jerry says, yeah, sure. George is like, I don't think I've ever spoken to her. Well, Jerry thinks maybe that's why she's happy. Kramer enters and gives them flyers for the latest offering from the Alex Theater. Kramer is working to de-stinkify it and revamp it. And they have a rare archival print of Spartacus with a special guest at the screening, costume director Jeffrey Harwood. George doesn't really see the point of paying money for a movie he can watch on TV. And Kramer, makes some good points about it's about the experience, not just about seeing the movie. Kramer tells them that Lloyd is meeting him at the coffee shop, and George is so irritated. Why does he need to be here? Well, I guess he's helping the theater get landmark status from the city because of his connections. And Jerry's like, well, I thought he screwed up the Dinkins campaign. So this is the last time we saw Lloyd in the frozen yogurt episode. That's when he proposes the name tag idea that Elaine came up with. And it really screwed up Dinkins' campaign and he lost the election. And Kramer says, yeah, he went through a lot after that. In fact, he spent time in a mental institution. Well, George's ears, of course, perk up at this. Anything that Lloyd Braun goes through, which is negative, George really enjoys. And Kramer says, listen, when he gets here, let's be really welcoming to him, like he's one of the gang. So Lloyd arrives and sits with them. George is like, how you doing? And Kramer answers for Lloyd, oh, he's fine. Lloyd offers some Chinese gum, and it's really delicious. And Kramer, of course, trying to shield him from any kind of emotional distress, is like, yes, yes, we shall all try a piece and tell you how delicious it is. Well, George refuses. I don't chew gum, he says. And Jerry likes it. He's like, yeah, it's from Chinatown. And then the scene just ends with them chewing gum for a few seconds. All right, next we're in Jerry's apartment. George thinks Ruthie Cohen gave him the wrong change. He's sure he paid with a $20 bill. Elaine enters, and Jerry's kind of sick of the gum that Lloyd gave him. He says it's a little lo mein. Elaine's like, what kind of gum is that? It's Chinese gum from Lloyd Braun. Elaine asks how Lloyd is doing. George gleefully tells her how after Dinkins lost the campaign, he went completely nuts and had to be institutionalized. Elaine says, oh, that was right around the time I broke up with him. You don't think I had anything to do with his breakdown, do you? Then Jerry jokes that he was babbling incoherently after they parted ways. George reminds them how his mother always favored Lloyd. Why can't you be more like that Lloyd Braun? And in the end, he became more like you, Jerry says. George has to leave. He has to drop off some Christmas presents to his parents. Well, are they out of town? Yeah, why do you think I'm going now? My take on this scene, I did read, and I thought about this as well, on the Goofs section of the IMDb page for this episode. They kind of point out that it's not very clear that Elaine broke up with Lloyd. So the last we see, she broke his chair, and she was worried that Lloyd thought she was too fat because she broke his chair. She was having what she thought was a non-fat yogurt, that whole episode. So anyway, it's not clear how that relationship ended, but to me, it certainly didn't seem like she wanted to break it off with him. But again, whatever. We just have to accept this. But it seemed like he kind of was the cause of their not seeing each other anymore. One thing I wanted to mention in this scene, I've never understood. So after Jerry says, I was babbling incoherently after we parted ways, Elaine says, yeah, well, I got news for you. I don't get it. Like, he doesn't respond. I don't understand. Is that to imply that he does still babble incoherently? It just is a weird, it's a weird response that I don't get. So if any of you know what she means by that, please message me. I don't get it. Yeah, well, I got news for you. Is that a big burn? I don't get it. All right, next we're in Queens. George exits his LeBaron in front of a neighbor's house, and it turns out it's Mr. Lazzari. And Mr. Lazzari is very interested in the car. And he's like, do you mind if I look under the hood? And George obliges. Yeah, you always knew your cause, Pop. And then Dina exits the house. It's Mr. Lazzari's daughter and George's old school friend. And he tells her, oh, you look just as pretty as you did back in high school. She says, well, that was some crazy times. Yeah, speaking of crazy, George taking every opportunity to talk about Lloyd. He changes the subject and says, did you hear about Lloyd Braun? The actress in this scene is Mary Jo Keenan, and she was a series regular on the show Nurses, and she's also appeared in the John Larroquette Show and Everybody Loves Raymond. I also learned that she is married to Mitch Hurwitz, who is the executive producer and I believe the creator of Arrested Development and a producer of many shows. I think she's adorable. I'm glad that they bring her back for a couple of more episodes. I just love her vibe, her energy. She seems so caring and concerned for George. I do want to bring up something about Dina. And it's somewhat annoying, but so I'm not calling this a jacket watch, although I am, I guess, technically watching Dina's jackets. But since it's not something that's addressed in the episode, it can't be an official jacket watch. I'm so sorry. I know you guys are waiting for me to do some really stupid theme song. But anyway, what is up with her jackets? They're ginormous. And I'm thinking, okay, this is the mid-90s when it was just, the standard of beauty was basically looking like you were a skeleton. So the waif era or whatever the fuck they called it was so screwed up. But anyway, Dina, or Mary Jo Keenan, who plays Dina, is a normal size. She's certainly not big, but I think she was like big for that time. And so I'm like, are they just trying to cover up the fact that she's not a size 0 or something? Because first of all, she's beautiful. I was actually looking to see if she was related to Gina Davis. There's something about her that really reminds me of Gina Davis. I think she's absolutely gorgeous. Anyway, just keep an eye out for this. Like in this episode, Every jacket she wears looks like 14 sizes too big for her. And when she comes back, every time she appears, she's in this ginormous jacket just covering her body. And it's very annoying to me. Like, she's a gorgeous woman. There's no reason to do this. But anyway, I'm a big fan. I think she does a fantastic job as Dina. Finally, there's a female character on here, and she's not a love interest, which is kind of rare. I think any other female character other than Elaine usually is some kind of a romantic interest for the guys. But I like that this is just a friend and there's no implication of anything romantic. But they just needed this character. And she does have some more depth, a lot more depth than a lot of the guest stars who are female on this series. All right, next we're at the Alex Theater. Kramer is giving Jerry and Elaine a tour of the theater, and they're very amused with how into it he is. And he loves it. It would really help if Lloyd could get the landmark status. Oh, can Lloyd really do that? Jerry says. Lloyd Braun can do anything he sets his mind to. Kramer is he's so supportive. And he has an ulterior motive here. They kind of bring this up just real quick, that usually Kramer doesn't have ulterior motives. He's pretty much like the straight shooter of the group. But this is a rare instance where it's like, no, you guys do not offend Lloyd Braun. Don't bring up anything about his mental institution stay. Like, I really need this landmark status. Anyway, Kramer says to Elaine, you should really say hi to him. Oh, shit. Elaine didn't know he was there. Oh, no, I'd rather not. But then Lloyd walks up and says hi to her. And we see a super awkward interaction, awkward Elaine, if you will. Lloyd tells her, oh, we have some reserved seats so we can all sit together. Elaine, of course, does not want to do this. And on the spot, she makes up this excuse that they have to sit in the front row, she and Jerry, because he forgot his glasses. And she thanks him and says goodbye, all jumbled and awkward. Lloyd says to Kramer, that was odd. Am I crazy, or does Jerry not wear glasses? And Kramer, of course, is like, you're not crazy. Jerry does wear glasses. Just forgot him, that's all. Puts his arm around him and says, not crazy. My take on the scene, I love awkward Elaine. JLD can just do this so well. I've said it before. It's not an easy thing to do to like pull off this awkward, like, I'm trying to come up with something right on the spot. I do want to call out Matt McCoy. Now, he plays the new Lloyd. The old actor who played Lloyd in the Frozen Yogurt episode was not available. But I really love, and I don't know if, I shouldn't doubt that actor, but it's a totally different Lloyd, from here on out. And the way Matt McCoy portrays him is so great. It's kind of creepy, a little robotic. It's just really well done. I really like Matt McCoy's portrayal of Lloyd. I think it's way better than kind of like the too smooth guy that we saw in the other episode, which I did like as well, but I like this shift in direction. And I think we've all been here, like where Elaine is in the scene, trying to come up with an excuse on the spot. Like, you don't want to do something, and it's like, I don't know what to say. And I just love that she includes Jerry in her excuse as well, because that, of course, serves well for his plot line in this episode. JLD is always a master at that pulling off the awkward, kind of nervous, doesn't know what to say Elaine. All right, next, we're in the theater, and Jerry and Elaine are in their front row seats. He's so annoyed. Why do we have to sit in the front row? Why couldn't we sit in the special seats? Elaine apologizes. She's like, I didn't want to lead Lloyd on. Seeing him made me very uncomfortable. The movie starts, and they both slunk down into their seats and lean their heads back. Jerry's like, yeah, you don't want to be uncomfortable. My take on the scene really quick. I love the physicality of them slinking down in their seats. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever sat in the front row of a movie theater. It certainly isn't the first choice, obviously, but I have this crazy memory, and it ages me, but I don't give a shit. And it also, I think, doesn't paint my taste in movies in the best light. It was the movie Coyote Ugly. And I went with a bunch of my friends from college, and for whatever reason, we had to sit in the front row. It wasn't our choice. I think it might have been sold out. Like, of course, Coyote Ugly, like big opening weekend. Anyway, it was awful. It was so awful. I think I might have fallen asleep because I was like, I can't watch. This is the worst angle, like whatever. But anyway, I have had that experience. It's not fun. And Coyote Ugly was a terrible movie. All right, next we're back in front of Mr. Lazzari's house in Queens. And George has just told Dina the whole story about Lloyd. And she feels for him. Poor Lloyd. Yep, completely bonkers, George says, not feeling any kind of sympathy at all. And Dina apologizes. Sorry, I can't be so flip about this after what happened to Pop. And George doesn't know what happened. Oh, I thought you'd heard. He had a nervous breakdown last year. Apparently he gave up his mechanic shop. It was too much for him. So we see him banging around under the hood. So George doesn't like that very much and makes him an excuse. And he's gotta be someplace. And he says, Pop, all right, put down the wrench, Pop, and gets him out from underneath the hood. Then we see a quick scene at the Alex. Kramer and Lloyd are enjoying the special seats, just loving Spartacus. Then we see front row Elaine and Jerry watching. They're both wolfing down popcorn, and a piece falls onto Elaine's chest, and as she grabs it, her button from her blouse falls to the floor. And back to George, we see him driving his LeBaron, and it starts making odd noises. And he's like, what the hell? Pop! Pop! He definitely thinks Pop fucked something up. All right, next we're back in the Alex, and Lloyd, Kramer, and Jerry are all in the lobby. And Lloyd says, sorry, you forgot your glasses. Jerry's massaging his neck. I don't know what I was thinking. Elaine enters and tells Kramer that there's a light out in the ladies' bathroom. He's like, yeah, no, it's being repaired. Well, besides saying that, we also notice that Elaine's shirt is wide open, revealing her cleavage, some of her bra, because of the missing button, obviously, but she doesn't seem to notice. Lloyd is mesmerized. She's also leaning back and stretching out her neck, from sitting in the front row. It's all very unintentionally sexy. And she says, I just need to stretch out in a hot bath. She says goodbye to Lloyd and exits. Kramer is leaning in as well, taking in her boob show. And Lloyd turns around and almost gets hit in the eye with Kramer's pipe. My take on this scene, well, it's Chesty LaRue debut. Okay, so I kind of have a bullshit card to pull here. So Elaine obviously had just been to the bathroom. She tells Kramer that the light isn't working. So I'm just wondering, was there not a mirror in the bathroom? Or if there was a mirror, was there no light? Was it pitch black? Because where I'm going with this is I feel like she would have looked in the mirror. Every woman looks in the mirror when they go to the bathroom. I don't care who you are. So I don't know. Maybe they should have changed the line and be like, there's no mirror in the bathroom, Kramer, or something. Because I just feel like if she had gone to the bathroom, she should have been able to see that her blouse was open. Again, none of this matters, but it's just my own little take on that. Now, I think a lot of you might be thinking, wouldn't she feel her blouse wide open, feel the air kind of a little bit more on her chest? Now, I will say in this particular scene, since she's been in the same room for a while, in this theater for a while, I think it is possible she wouldn't feel that. I've had experiences like this where it's embarrassing, but your skirt or whatever is tucked into your underwear after the bathroom. There are things you would think, oh my gosh, why didn't I feel that my shirt was open or my fly was down or my skirt is tucked into my underwear, my ass is exposed. There are instances. So I'm willing to buy that Elaine doesn't notice it here. But I'll get into another bullshit card in the next scene. But back to this scene. I just love the, as I said earlier, the unintentionally sexy moments, arching her back, leaning her head back. It's so perfect. And it is totally sexy. She looks amazing. To quote Elaine herself, nice rack. Also, it must be noted, we haven't met her yet. We will in a couple of episodes. This isn't too far from Sue Ellen Mishke wearing a bra as a top. Now, I know that's not Elaine's intention here, but dare I say this is a little bit of a sneak preview, a titty preview, if you will. Also, here's another thing. It's nitpicky, I know, but this is what I do. I know you guys are probably used to it by now. Why doesn't Jerry see this? Why doesn't Jerry? He's standing right there. So I just wish they would have made it clearer why Jerry doesn't see what Kramer and Lloyd are seeing. It's just something that's always irked me. I'm like, he's right there too. So, I mean, obviously they needed him not to see it because he would have probably pointed it out. What are you doing? But I just wish maybe it was in a deleted scene. It wasn't on the DVD, but maybe there was some way that Jerry had been diverted. His attention had been diverted. But anyway, I just feel like Jerry's right there. He would have seen this as well. All right, next we are on the street. Open bloused Elaine is walking down the street and is trying to make her way past a florist who's spraying the sidewalk down with water. And he gets an eye full of Elaine's chest. and she sees an officer and complains to him about the man with the hose. She's like, he's flooding the street. It's a waste of water. Couldn't he just use a broom? Of course, the cop is convinced by her her boobs in his face. He says, lady, you convinced me. And so he goes over to confront the florist. And that's when Elaine looks down and she realizes her button is missing. Her blouse is open. She wraps herself in her coat and exits. All right. Okay. So my BS card here is that it's clearly around the holidays. So they mention in the extras how this is their holiday episode. It's not about Christmas or Hanukkah or anything, but the only way that they establish that is because everywhere they go is decorated in Christmas decorations, like in Monk's and down the street. So it's clearly December time. So it's cold out. And I mean, this is where I'm like, okay, she would feel it then. If you're going outside from a warm building, you're going to feel that all over your boobs. So this is where I call a little bit of a bullshit card. So, okay, Elaine doesn't notice that. But I do love that we have eco-conscious Elaine here. I love her concern about the water wastage. And how creepy is that cop? Gross. All right, next we're in Jerry's apartment. Kramer gives Jerry a pair of glasses from the lost and found at the Alex because Lloyd is coming over and, he thinks you wear glasses. Jerry's like, this is just going too far. Oh, so he's just going to think you two didn't sit with him on purpose. Oh, that's real nice. All right, next we're in Monk's. George is accusing Ruthie Cohen of shorting him his change from the $20 bill he paid with. And she says, I don't think so. And he says he can prove it. Says he was doodling on that $20 bill. And if there's a 20 in there in the register with red lips on it, that's his. He asks her to open the register and she says, not unless you buy something. Fine, he says, I'll buy a pack of gum. Lloyd happens to be there and he approaches. He says, I thought you didn't chew gum. I don't, he says. Ruthie opens the drawer and there's no red-lipped 20s in there. And he's like, I know I gave it to you. And Lloyd's like, can you hurry it up, George? I got to be somewhere. And there's now another customer waiting to pay. So George leaves all distraught and he tells Ruthie, I'm not going to forget about this. Now, the actress here is named Ruth Cohen. She plays Ruthie Cohen. And we've seen her in the background, obviously, for so many episodes. But now I'm telling you her background, no pun intended, because this is the first episode where she has some actual dialogue. I love this story. So, like I said, we've seen her in the background so often. In the end of the series, she will have appeared in 101 episodes of Seinfeld. Pretty incredible. But the writers, Tom Gamble and Max Pross, were just fascinated by her. And they mentioned in the extras that they had learned her story a little bit, that after she was widowed, she needed some extra money. And so she decided to work as an extra on sets. And there's always extra work to get. And she's also appeared as an extra in Golden Girls and Murder, She Wrote. So they just figured she's such a staple of the scenes in Monk's. She's always in the background and they wanted to give her something extra for this episode. And I think she's adorable. Pretty obviously not an actor, but I like the background story. Again, I'm just punning it all over the place. And it's just such a fun day for her as well. I love that they recognized her and they gave her this opportunity to, have an actual storyline. They did say, though, her first reading of Your Car's on Fire, I guess that's the first scene that they filmed with her. They said that they kind of had to rein her back because I think the first way she said it, the first take, she goes, your car's on fire, like kind of like a na 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 na. And they're like, yeah, that's not what we're looking for, Ruthie. But anyway, I just think it's very, very cute how they included her in this episode and kind of paid homage to all the times we've seen her in the background. All right, next we are in Jerry's apartment. Lloyd arrives and Jerry is wearing the glasses and reading a paper. And Lloyd brought more gum and yes, let's all have a chew. Of course, Jerry doesn't want any. And this is what the holidays are all about, huh? Kramer says, 3 buddies sitting around chewing gum. Kramer tells Jerry that Lloyd thinks he can get more of this gum. Jerry whips out a hanky, cleans the glasses. Well, Lloyd's a very industrious fellow. I'm sure he can accomplish anything he sets his mind to, kind of points at him. Lloyd says, the importer's in Chinatown. I can introduce you. It's not necessary. Kramer's like, Jerry, he wants to do you a favor. I know that, Kramer. And Kramer says, it's very kind of you, Lloyd. And Jerry really appreciates it, don't you, Jerry? Hey, Lloyd changes the subject and says, how about that Elaine, huh? tells Jerry she was practically undressing in front of me at the theater. Jerry says, I didn't see anything. Oh, Kramer says, you really missed a show, buddy. Boom, ba-ba-ba-boom. And then we have another moment of just hearing them chew their gum. All right, next we are in the park. Dina asked to meet George again and tells him that she's concerned about him. Ever since Pop's breakdown, she's very sensitive to the signs of mental instability. She names the symptoms that she sees in George: nervousness, irritability, paranoia. George is confused. No, I wasn't the one with the problem. Lloyd Braun was in the nut house. And Dina points out taking pleasure in the misfortunes of others. And George is like, all my friends do that. Such a great line. And she says, look, I'm just concerned. I'm trying to help. Then George gets distracted. He points out a woman on this horse. It's Ruthie Cohen. Tells Dina she tried to steal $20 from me, and I might have gotten it back, but Lloyd Braun interfered. And Dina's like, okay, so again, it comes back to Lloyd. George gets up and goes after Ruthie. Hey, you, get back here. All right, next we're in Monk's, and George is still convinced Ruthie stole $20, and he's just getting more and more irritated by it. And Jerry humors him, why don't you snoop around the stables? I love the line. Any high-flying cashiers throwing around $20 bills with big lips. Elaine enters, and Jerry greets her. If it isn't Chesty LaRue. What? Well, I was chewing gum with Lloyd Braun. He was bragging about the peep show you gave him at the Alex. Elaine laughs, and she explains, I lost a button, and my blouse was wide open. She says, I must have left it at the theater. Jerry suggests she looks at the Lost and Found. She's like, yeah, I'm going to go there later to check. It was a beautiful button, It was antique ivory. It was my mother's. Jerry suggests that she may have eaten it due to the way she was wolfing down that popcorn. My take on this scene, I love that Elaine is amused by Jerry's ribbing. And I just want to call out the writing, the wording of the way Jerry says it, chewing gum with Lloyd Braun, and he was bragging about the peep show you gave him at the Alex. Just so funny. And that Elaine is not bothered. Whatever it happened, I just love that choice that she's not embarrassed. Although, it does remind me of another button issue. Let's not forget her nip Christmas card. It was due to a button. I forgot to button it. Why does Elaine have so much trouble with buttons? And then also in the scene, she just has to move the story forward, explaining about the button and that she's going to go back to the theater to check Lost and Found. They did mention in the extras, the original storyline was that she was supposed to think she ate the button. So Jerry mentions it here, but originally Elaine was supposed to think that she did in fact eat it and ends up, I guess, in the plumbing at the Alex. Anyway, I think it's a good change that they didn't go with that storyline because I don't think it tracks with Elaine that she's going to try and get a button back and go through disgusting plumbing like from the toilet. Gross. Another interesting thing I thought was that the costume designer on Seinfeld had to look for buttons that resembled popcorn. And I think they did a good job. That button definitely looked like a piece of popcorn. All right, next we're at the Alex. Mr. Harwood is there, and he's looking for his glasses at the Lost and Found, the half glasses. And Kramer figures out those were the glasses he gave to Jerry. He says, well, they're not here, but I'm sure they'll show up. Kramer asks him to keep an eye on the place while he goes out to get some paraffin wax for the countertop, and so he exits. Mr. Harwood looks in the Lost and Found box and finds Elaine's button and gets very excited. Oh my goodness, what a spanking button. Next, we're on the street. George starts his car, but it needs to warm up because of whatever Pop did under the hood. There's this car honking and honking, waiting for his parking spot. George gets so mad, and he gets out and approaches that car, and it's Ruthie Cohen. Oh, it's you! And he says he's not budging until she admits she stole his $20. You're not so tough when you're not on your horse, huh, Ruthie? And she points out, your car's on fire. He runs back in a panic. She yells after him, Merry Christmas. Well, he tries to get the florist to use his hose. The cops made me disconnected, he says. So he grabs the guy's broom and tries tamping down the fire, which of course isn't doing much of anything. We cut to later. The car is melted, pretty much. Kramer approaches in shock. What happened to your car? The John Voight car is no more. Kramer offers George his car anytime he needs. Really? Thanks, George says. I owe you a big one. Kramer exits and says, Merry Christmas. Whatever. Next, we're at the Alex. Jerry enters and asks where Lloyd is, and Kramer says, yeah, he'll be here soon. And Jerry is so irritated. Look, I'll go to Chinatown with him, but that's it. Kramer grabs the half glasses off of Jerry's face, since they belong to Mr. Harwood, and gives him another pair from the Lost and Found. And these are huge Coke bottle glasses, and they magnify Jerry's eyes. Whoa, these are really strong, he says. Lloyd arrives and says, oh, you ready to go? And he asks, has anyone seen Elaine today? Kramer's like, yeah, she called earlier. Needs to look through Lost and Found. Lloyd jokes, maybe I should stick around and see what she's wearing. Or not wearing, if you know what I mean. And Jerry agrees because he can't see shit through those glasses. Yeah, let's just stick around. Lloyd says, but they're expecting us. I'm just going to grab a hot dog and then we'll go. So he orders the hot dog, the only one left in the little spinner thing. And the attendant asks him if he's out of his mind. Well, of course, this gets Kramer's attention. The one hot dog in the case has been there since the silent era. The guy says, anyone would be insane to eat it. Kramer's like, no one's insane. And look, I'm going to eat it. One hot dog, please. And even Lloyd's like, Kramer, maybe not. No. So Kramer takes a bite and says, this is a perfectly sane food to eat. Interesting texture. He starts choking and stumbles out of the theater. And we see a quick scene on the street with Kramer just really struggling to keep this hot dog down, and he ends up vomiting it out right in front of the flower shop. The florist sees this. He's had enough. He grabs his hose, shaking his head. Next, we're back on the street a little bit later. The florist is hosing Kramer's puke off of the sidewalk, and Elaine approaches, and she asks him, weren't you told not to use that hose? Now, how would you happen to know that? He says. Elaine's like, Hey, you were the lady who was talking to the cops. Elaine tries to deny it, but then the florist gets distracted, gets called from the other direction, and points his hose right at Elaine. You're soaking me! You're soaking me! All right, my take on this scene. Calling a big old bullshit card. Okay, I know I'm using this term bullshit card, and you guys are like, where did this come from? Well, I will tell you. I always listen to Office Ladies podcast every week, and they say this a lot. They've always said it. I call a bullshit card if they notice something in the episode that really doesn't make sense or doesn't jive. And well, they've been saying it a lot lately, which is probably why it's just in my head. So I'm using it. And they're using it a lot because they are in the post Steve Carell seasons of The Office, the worst episodes of The Office by far, in my opinion. I'm willing to say it's not even my opinion. It's just fact. I mean, those episodes are so bad, you guys. I don't know if any of you are fans out there of The Office, but those seasons after Steve Carell has left, holy crap, like they're unwatchable to me. I am rewatching it just so I can listen to the podcast and know what they're talking about. But anyway, they're using the term bullshit card a lot because I feel like those writers just gave up. Like they gave up on anything making sense. They gave up on characters being true to who they've been established to be in the series. They have given up on any kind of logic and continuity to what the show was. And so a lot of times during these episodes of Office Ladies, they're like, I'm going to call a bullshit card here because didn't Dwight say he would never blah, blah, blah. Like, so anyway, they've been using that a lot. So I'm just incorporating it here. My bullshit card for this scene is the way Elaine gets hosed down. I just don't think it's believable at all. So originally the scene was that the florist recognizes her as he says, the floozy who was talking to the cop. I think he calls her a floozy because her shirt was open that day. After he recognizes her, he purposely points the hose to her as like retaliation. But they changed that. And I think that's a really good decision. It would have been way too aggressive if this man did this on purpose. I mean, it's assault. She gets assaulted by this man by his hose or whatever. That sounded dirtier than I meant. But anyway, so I'm glad that they changed it to be kind of inadvertently he hoses her down. But I also think like whose arm just moves like that because they get called in the other direction. Like it was almost as if, oh, if my head turns this way, my arm automatically turns the other way. Like it just looks so forced and not realistic. I think they could have done something as easy as like someone runs by and like knocks his hand and then she gets like sprayed. Like, I don't know, but it seems so forced, not natural. And it's always bugged me. All right, next we are at the Alex. Jerry, Kramer, and Lloyd are there. Kramer is kind of hunched over, sitting down, recovering from his hot dog poisoning. Elaine arrives, soaking wet, with her white tank top just clinging to her chest. Lloyd says, "Whoa, Elaine, once again you've managed to top yourself." He says, "Come on, Jerry, let's go. The car's out front." Jerry, with his Coke bottle glasses, just stands up and he's like trying to make his way. He looks at Elaine. And we see Elaine through his point of view, which is totally blurry. And Elaine is like giggling, like, what the hell? And then Jerry carefully follows Lloyd out of the Alex. Elaine says, "What is Lloyd's problem?" Kramer lectures her about her being so desperate to get Lloyd's attention. Parading around in a wet t-shirt. She explains, "I got sprayed with a hose." Yeah, well, the Alex is a family theater, not one of your swing joints. My take on this scene, okay, I might not be a fan of how she gets hosed down, but I love this. Again, unintentionally sexy with the white, wet t-shirt. Look, most of the humor in this scene comes from Jerry wearing those glasses. And I have to admit, it never fails to make me laugh. If I need cheering up, I just have to look at Jerry, like a shot of Jerry in these glasses. They just look hilarious. And that point of view from Jerry where we see Elaine laughing very genuinely, I love that. And I've heard, I think it was on the Signcast podcast where they were like, "I think that was Julia breaking character." I'm like, maybe, but I also think that is actually how Elaine would react. She'd be like, "What the hell?" and like laugh very genuinely. So I don't think she's breaking character there. I think like they had this whole theory on their podcast. Like, I think Julia didn't see Jerry in those glasses before they filmed the scene. So I think that's like her genuine reaction, like her first time seeing it. I was like, or she's an actress, you guys, and an amazing laugh actress. So sit down. Anyway, I don't see this as breaking character. This is exactly how Elaine would react. She would laugh her ass off seeing Jerry in these damn glasses. And finally, about the scene, I love Kramer's lecture. He's just so disappointed in her. I love it. All right, next we're on the street. The LeBaron is being towed away and George is watching it with Dina. So she clarifies, "Oh, you want my father to pay for this?" And George says, "Well, you saw him. He was under the hood fiddling with the engine. Who knows what he might have done?" And Dina's like, "Oh, okay, so I suppose Lloyd Braun also had something to do with this?" "No, but the lady on the horse. She wanted my spot." So Dina sums it up. So the people to blame are her father and the woman on the horse. That's right. And then George points across the street. "And him." And we see the florist. "The man with the flowers," Dina says. And George understands why she's reacting this way. Like, I know this sounds crazy, but then a car pulls up and it's Lloyd and Jerry. Jerry's in the passenger seat. And George looks over and says, "Hey, that's my best friend. That's Jerry Seinfeld." And he's trying to get his attention. Jerry looks over in those glasses and does not recognize George. And then they drive off and Dina asks, "That was your best friend?" "Yeah, but he doesn't wear glasses." "That man was wearing glasses." "Yes, but only to fool Lloyd Braun." Okay, shit. All right. I'm saying it again. I'm so sorry. Bullshit card again. Dina is friends with George from high school. Doesn't that mean she would also know Jerry and Lloyd? I think that's a big hole, you guys. But what can we do? We have to accept it. Also, wouldn't Jerry be able to hear George? Is this like a soundproof car? Anyway, I digress. I will move on. Next, we're in Chinatown in Lloyd's car. Jerry and Lloyd arrive, and Lloyd asks for some gum money. Jerry, not being able to see, hands him a $100 bill. Lloyd looks at it and says, "All right, I'll be back." We cut to Dina and George on the street, and he's really trying to convince her he's not crazy. This is just a bunch of coincidences. Finally, she says, "Well, I guess it's possible." Back to Chinatown and Lloyd's car, Lloyd returns with 6 cases of gum and hands them to Jerry. He's like, "What? All this?" "Yup, $100 worth." "I gave you $100? Lloyd asks, "Am I crazy or is that a lot of gum?" "It's a lot of gum." Next, we are at the Institute. Kramer gives Mr. Harwood his glasses back, and Mr. Harwood welcomes him to the Institute for the Preservation of Motion Picture Costumes and Wardrobe. "Ah, yes," Kramer says, "the IPM PCW. We prefer to call it the Institute." Kramer spots the Henry VIII costume and says, "Hey, we're screening that at the Alex. Maybe you could lend this to me." Mr. Harwood points out that, it wouldn't fit him, but it would fit someone of a short, stocky build with somewhat generous proportions. And Kramer has an idea. You don't say. Next, we're on the street, and we see George in the Henry VIII costume. Yeah, you really cashed in on that favor real quick. And Kramer tells him, "You must project a royal bearing of a king." Yeah, I'll give you a royal bearing. George stops at a newsstand to pick up some gum. He tries to pay, but the clerk tells him, "I'm sorry, we don't accept bills with lipstick on the president." It turns out George had the $20 bill all along, and he says, "I owe that cashier an apology." Side note, of course, I'm sure you all recognize Larry David plays the newsstand employee. Dina is walking down the street and sees George in the Henry VIII getup. She stops and says, "Oh my God." No, George says, "It's not what you think." He starts chasing her down the street. "I got this from the Institute. All right, then there's a tag to the episode. We're at the Alex. Elaine is there, and Mr. Harwood arrives. He asks about your friend, King Henry, and Kramer says, "Oh, he ran away." Kramer goes over to talk to Lloyd, and Elaine asks Mr. Harwood about his button. And he tells her, yeah, he found it in the Lost and Found. It's antique ivory. And she's like, "I think that's my button. Shall I undo it?" And he's like, "Oh, yes, of course you can undo it. I'm a little ticklish." So we see her giggling and leaning into him as she's trying to get her button back. And Lloyd looks at her and says, "We really need to get Elaine a boyfriend." Kramer says, "Tell me about it." My take on the tag. I love this interaction with Mr. Harwood and Elaine. It's a great button to the episode. Pun intended. And that's really all I can say. Just an adorable interaction and a really fun ending to the episode. All right, I'm going to take a quick break, and I will see you on the other side. Grandpa?
Yes, Timmy?
Why do you have that glass eye?
Well, it all started when your grandma put on a blouse. The blouse that was too small for her, it turned out. And at the dinner table, she was sitting across from me, and there was a malfunction.
A malfunction?
Yes, Timmy. Her button popped off that blouse and shot straight into my right eye at a speed unlike anything I ever saw fighting in Nam. I never saw that little guy coming, and now I can't unsee it.
A button?
A button. That damn button.
Buttons! The most dangerous fasteners on the market today. I bet you thought zippers were more dangerous, but you'd be wrong. Buttons cause more injuries per capita than any other clothing closures. You may prefer to call them buttons, but we like to say button stands for bad, unreliable, terrible toggles. Oh no, sir. That's why we are proud to introduce butt-ons, because they stay on. Butt-ons are a revolutionary type of button made from materials that can withstand 500 times the pressure of your standard button. Or, as we like to say, it stands for, be under the threat of nipples showing. Not only will you never have to worry about a button popping off and becoming a dangerous plastic missile, butt-ons are also edible. That's right, they're safe to eat. If your baby or confused grandparent mistakes your button for food, it'll taste like lime and safely digest through their system. Butt-ons are also foolproof. There's no chance you will misbutton your shirt and have that embarrassing moment of the bottom being uneven. Butt-ons are fitted with sensors, so if you try to slip that little guy into the wrong slot, you will feel a mild electric shock. Replace all of your life-threatening buttons with butt-ons by ordering a set today at www.notonemorei.button. Butt-ons. Best unparalleled things to open shirts.
And we're back. Okay, so let's get into Greg's sack lunch since the extras, didn't have a lot to offer. I did pepper in some already in the episode, but let's get into Greg's sack lunch. Greg is our most dedicated contributor to this podcast. Every week he sends us a sack full of his thoughts. So the first thing I find in his sack are his overall thoughts. He says, "This is one of the weaker episodes of the season for me. While Elaine, Jerry, and Kramer are combined into one story somewhat, it's George's story of trying not to look crazy to Dina and dealing with Ruthie Cohen that I find the funniest of everything. Lloyd Braun, played by the new actor this time around, who looks like Steve Carell in a funhouse mirror, does nothing for me, and I don't get how all of a sudden he's Kramer's friend." Yes, you're right. Absolutely right, Greg. I guess you are calling out some bullshit cards as well. Because I don't understand why he's friends with Kramer either. I didn't say that before, but it definitely is confusing. Like I said, I do like Matt McCoy's performance. I like this portrayal. It's more interesting to me than the original Lloyd Braun, so I'm not quite on the same page there. But yes, I do think a lot of this stuff, there's just too many plot holes in this episode to make it one of the really strong episodes of the season. All right, next in Greg's sack are his favorite scenes and Elaine moments. He says, "My favorite Elaine moment is when Elaine comes out of the theater with her shirt opened, showing the goods. The way she stretches back in front of Lloyd, it's all very funny and, of course, hot. Oh, yeah, so hot. I mean, I don't think they address that enough in the extras, in my opinion. I'm like, can we just say how hot JLD is? I mean, I really wanted to get her thoughts on like having to do this with her boobs out, but we didn't get it. Next, Greg says, "I like when Elaine comes to the theater all wet and Kramer basically calls her out for trying to turn on Lloyd. This isn't one of your swing joints," cracks me up. Oh my God. Yeah, that's such a great line. This isn't one of your swing joints. Like, what? Since when does Elaine frequent those? And why does Kramer think she does? Next in Greg's sack is his scene swap idea. He says, "Lloyd sucks. Everything about him on here sucks. I'd rather just give Elaine a completely different story. He's downright creepy, and Kramer enabling him constantly makes me mad at him too." Yeah, again, the non-explanation of why the hell Kramer's friends with him is it's a big hole for me. And so they did mention in the extras that the whole protecting Lloyd and his feelings about being institutionalized was based on a real friend of the writers who, it was the same situation. Like, this guy would go out of his way to make sure everyone treated this one friend or his one acquaintance or whatever, like, don't say anything about being crazy. Like, it was based on that. And I think it does track, like, of all the characters, Kramer would be that guy. But again, like I said before, it's this ulterior motive of him wanting to get the landmark status. So that's a little bit, doesn't really track with Kramer's personality. But at any rate, that is why they did this. It does, I agree, it seems to come out of left field. Like, why did they have to bring Lloyd back? So yeah, the character Lloyd is just creepy and weird. But I don't know. I guess I'm just entertained by the portrayal here. And I mean, giving Elaine a totally different storyline. I'm not sitting here saying it's the best storyline. I do think it's funny. It amuses me. And I think too, it like just illustrates how easy men either misinterpret something that's innocent or can be influenced by just the showing of cleavage. I mean, I think it just shows all around the patheticness of men when it comes to just something as simple as seeing cleavage and seeing a woman with a low-cut shirt. And finally, Greg's extra thoughts. He says, "I would watch an entire show about Ruthie Cohen. She doesn't even really have to do anything funny, but her mere presence in a storyline, when she's been on the show this whole time, makes me love her. And I love when George goes off on her and she just calmly says, 'Your car's on fire.' She's so funny. 'You're not so tough when you're not on your horse' is probably the funniest line in the episode." Yeah, the interaction is really funny. I already went into, how much I just adore that they gave her this storyline because of her, presence on the show in the background. Yeah, and like I said, "your car's on fire." I don't know how many takes it took them to get her to say it in a normal way, but like I said, there were some readings she did that just did not work. Thank you so much, Greg, for sending in your thoughts. And now it's time to close Greg's sack lunch. All right, my favorite Elaine moments. It's awkward Elaine. I love when JLD is like kind of does that whole like kind of almost like chokes on her spit. She pulls it off every time. She does it with Lippman a few times. Every time Elaine has to kind of stumble to come up with something and it has to be very awkward. JLD is just, she's a masterclass at this. And a close second is just her Chesty LaRue stretching moment. I love it. Very sexy, but also very funny. All right, and my final notes for the episode. Like I said, I don't mind this storyline. I do see what Greg is saying, where he would just kind of scrap this whole thing. But, my usual complaint, I think the storyline's fine, but it's just she doesn't have enough screen time with it. I think I would actually swap out some of the John Voight car stuff. I do love other parts of George's storyline. I like that he's getting pleasure out of Lloyd having this, episode of being in the nut house, as he calls it. I know we shouldn't say that, but I'm just quoting George. And I do feel like Elaine could have contributed more to George's story, probably just because I want to see an Elaine and Dina scene. I think that would have been really fun. Somehow integrate them together. I don't know how, but I think that would have been a fun scene because I love that actress too. I think it's a fun episode. It's really quotable in my house. There's something about the line, "This is what the holidays are all about. 3 guys sitting around chewing gum." Like, what? It's so funny. And then in our house as well, we say interesting texture. If the word texture comes up, we have to say that. And Jerry in the glasses. I mean, it's so funny. It's so dumb, but it's a visual gag that makes me laugh every single time. We have a bunch of visual gags here. We've got Jerry in the glasses. We got Elaine with her boobs out. Maybe George in the Henry VIII costume. It's a visual gag. I just think it's a very entertaining episode. And I think that's all I can say about the gum. Please be sure to follow Hot and Heavy on social. On Insta, it's at Hot Heavy Elaine. On TikTok, at Elaine Bennis Podcast. And if you'd like to email me, please do at elainepodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.